His wife turned out to be someone he could never have imagined. Sarah, the woman I planned to marry, the one I thought I knew inside and out, was hiding secrets so vile they made my stomach churn. It all started with a condom. Not just any condom, but one poorly hidden in the pocket of her handbag. A single piece of latex that shattered everything I believed about us. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't that guy. But when Sarah left her bag open on the kitchen counter, and I reached in to grab her keys, the ones she always forgot, my fingers brushed against something unfamiliar, something that didn't belong. Curiosity got the better of me. I pulled it out, expecting maybe a crumpled receipt or an old piece of candy. But no, it was a condom, a brand we never used. I stared at it, my mind racing, trying to rationalize. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe it was old, forgotten from before we met. But deep down, I knew better. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months. This wasn't old. This was fresh, recent, real. I waited for her to come home that evening, the condom sitting on the dining table like an uninvited guest. When she walked through the door, her face lit up, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Hey, babe," she chirped, setting down her grocery bags. "You won't believe the traffic today." I didn't let her finish. I pointed at the table. "What's that, Sarah?" She froze, her eyes darting to the condom, then back to me. For a split second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Panic? Guilt? But she quickly masked it with a laugh. "Oh my God, Greg, seriously?" She chuckled, shaking her head like I just told the world's dumbest joke. "That's probably from one of my friends. You know how we sometimes share bags at the gym?" But I wasn't buying it. "Your friends leave condoms in your bag now?" I shot back, my voice colder than I intended. She rolled her eyes, feigning annoyance. "Greg, don't be ridiculous. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Not when my gut screamed otherwise. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed every conversation, every moment we'd shared. Her sudden work trips, the mysterious friend she was helping in South Asia. It all started to fit together in a puzzle I didn't want to solve. 2 days later, I contacted Marcus, a private investigator recommended by my lawyer friend. I felt like a fool, but I needed the truth. Marcus was blunt, no nonsense. "You'll have your answers soon enough," he promised. And he did. But nothing could have prepared me for what he found. Sarah wasn't in South Asia for charity work. She wasn't helping a friend. She was there with him, Ethan, my business partner, the guy I'd worked alongside for 10 years. The guy Sarah always joked about being the ugliest guy in the office. Brilliant coder, socially awkward, harmless, or so I thought. Turns out, the man everyone underestimated was hiding more than just poor social skills. He was hiding my fiancée in his hotel room halfway across the world. When Marcus showed me the photos, I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. There they were, Sarah and Ethan, laughing, holding hands, sharing intimate glances that were once reserved for me. But that wasn't the worst part. Marcus dug deeper. Sarah and Ethan weren't just having an affair. They were using the charity trip as a cover for something much darker, embezzling funds from our company. My company. I canceled the wedding quietly. Sarah had no idea. When she returned, expecting everything to be as it was, I had a surprise waiting. Not the kind she hoped for. I invited our families, friends, even Ethan's wife. Yes, he had a wife. To our house for a special celebration. Sarah walked in, her face lighting up with joy. "Greg, what's all this?" She beamed, thinking it was some grand romantic gesture. But the real surprise was just beginning. "We're playing a game," I announced. "It's called the test of honesty." Everyone laughed, thinking it was harmless fun. We used a simple lie detector app on our phones. The first questions were innocent. "Have you ever eaten someone else's cake in the fridge?" Laughter erupted around the room. Then someone, probably tipsy, asked the question that changed everything. "Have you ever cheated on your husband?" Sarah laughed, that same confident, dismissive laugh. "Of course not," she declared. But the app had other ideas. "False. The room fell silent. She tried to laugh it off. Oh, come on. These apps are never accurate. But I wasn't laughing. I pulled out my phone and showed everyone the first photo Marcus had sent me. Sarah, tangled up with Ethan in a hotel bed. Gasps echoed through the room. Sarah's face turned ghostly pale. It's not what it looks like, she stammered. That could be anyone. But the evidence was just beginning. Really? I raised an eyebrow. Because I found messages on our smart fridge. You forgot to log out of your account. I tapped the fridge's touchscreen, and there it was. A string of messages between Sarah and Ethan, planning their little charity getaway. The room erupted in whispers, gasps, and the occasional curse. But I wasn't done. Let's keep playing, I said, my voice steady. Sarah, if I'm wrong, show everyone that you don't have a tattoo with his name on it. Her eyes widened. She froze. I don't need to prove anything, she snapped. Oh, but you do, I replied, my smile cold. The room held its breath. And that's when Ethan's wife stepped forward. That's why Sarah came to our barbecues so often, she hissed, pretending she adored our kids. She pulled out bank statements, expensive purchases in Asia, jewelry that Ethan never bought for her, but Sarah wore proudly. And then, she showed us a receipt, $10,000, for the earrings Sarah was wearing. But this was just the beginning. I had more, much more, and the night was far from over. I shrugged, keeping my voice light, almost playful. Well, it's worth checking out. The room's tension thickened like a fog as I pulled out my phone. With a few swipes, I brought up a screenshot. A still frame from a live stream Sarah's so-called friend had shared. There she was, unmistakably Sarah, tangled in bed with none other than Ethan, the ugliest guy in the office. The room went deathly silent, save for the faint buzzing of the refrigerator's compressor. All eyes turned to Sarah. Her face flushed deep crimson. She let out a nervous laugh that echoed awkwardly against the walls. It's not me. It could be anyone, she stammered, her voice climbing an octave. But the silence of the room wasn't buying it. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I walked over to the smart fridge, the same one she insisted we buy because of its modern convenience. Little did she know it would become her undoing. I tapped the screen and navigated to the messenger app she'd forgotten to log out of. Let's see what our smart fridge has to say, I muttered. A string of messages lit up the screen. Explicit, undeniable, and time-stamped. Sarah and Ethan exchanging not just flirtations, but detailed plans of their rendezvous, complete with coded jokes about charity work and coding sessions. Gasps filled the room. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Her mother, sitting on the edge of the sofa, clasped her hands over her mouth in shock. But then, from the corner, a voice pierced the tension. This is no reason for such a scandal, muttered Mark, one of our mutual friends. His voice was dismissive, trying to brush it off like it was a misunderstanding. I turned to him, my eyes narrowing. No reason, I echoed, my voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of fury. Let me tell you about the corporate party, Mark. The room fell silent again, the atmosphere growing heavier by the second. Remember that party 6 months ago? I continued, locking eyes with him. Ethan was there. So were most of you. And one of you, I paused, letting the suspense build, had too much to drink. I shifted my gaze to Tom, a colleague who was already looking pale. Tom, I said quietly, do you remember what you said to me that night? Tom swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape that wasn't there. Greg, he began, but his voice faltered. You apologized, I reminded him. You said you'd known about their affair for a long time but didn't have the guts to tell me. A murmur rippled through the crowd. People were shifting in their seats now, the betrayal starting to seep into the fabric of the room. Tom's shoulders slumped. I didn't know how to. And when I asked for more details, I pressed on. You admitted they met every week. Every damn week. Sarah's breathing grew ragged. She opened her mouth to speak, but I wasn't finished. But here's the kicker, I said. turning to face the room fully. Ethan didn't just steal my fiancée. He's been stealing from my company too. A collective gasp surged through the crowd. Even those who tried to defend Sarah earlier were now staring at her and Ethan with disbelief. I have the records, I continued, my voice icy. Financial statements, transactions, all traced back to him. And Sarah? She was in on it. Sarah's facade crumbled. She stood there, trembling, her eyes darting from face to face, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. But there was no one left. Ethan, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. Greg, listen, he began, but his voice was weak, unconvincing. Save it, I snapped. You'll have plenty of time to explain to the authorities. The room buzzed with whispered conversations, disbelief, and the sound of relationships unraveling. But this was far from over. Let's keep the game going, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. We're just getting started. And with that, I pulled out the next piece of evidence, a bank statement that would expose even deeper betrayals. Sarah started making excuses, her voice shaky, desperate to regain control of the narrative slipping through her fingers. Greg, you're blowing this out of proportion. It's not what you think, she stammered, trying to regain even a shred of the composure she once commanded. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only the cold satisfaction of the truth finally surfacing. Okay, I said, my tone icy yet calm, a sharp contrast to the chaos bubbling beneath the surface. If I'm wrong, show everyone that you don't have a tattoo with his name on it. The room went dead silent. The tension was suffocating, a thick, oppressive blanket pressing down on everyone present. Every eye in the room was on Sarah, waiting, watching, the weight of their gaze almost tangible. Her mouth opened as if to speak, then closed just as quickly. She looked around, her eyes darting from face to face, searching desperately for an escape, for someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one moved. The silence was damning. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her arms, hugging herself as if that could shield her from the truth that now hovered in the air, undeniable and suffocating. And then, she refused. I don't have to prove anything to you, she snapped, but her voice lacked conviction. It was a hollow defiance, brittle and fragile, and everyone knew it. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Murmurs started, soft at first, like the distant rumble of an approaching storm, then growing louder and more intense. The room was a cauldron of disbelief and betrayal, bubbling over with the raw emotions of those who had been deceived. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I turned to Ethan, who had been standing stiffly in the corner, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the floor as if he could disappear into it. Your turn, I said, my voice steady and unyielding. Show everyone that you don't have a tattoo with her name on it. The tension in the room skyrocketed, a palpable force pressing down on us all. You could hear a pin drop, the stillness was that profound. Ethan's face turned ashen, the color draining from it as reality crashed down on him. He shifted uncomfortably, pulling at his collar as if it were suddenly too tight, sweat beading at his temples and glistening under the harsh lights. And then he refused to. The room erupted. People were shouting, disbelief giving way to outrage. Friends, family. Everyone was caught in the whirlwind of betrayal, their trust shattered like glass underfoot. But there was one voice that cut through the chaos, sharp, clear, and furious. That's why Sarah came to our barbecues so often, hissed Ethan's wife Lisa. Her face was a mask of controlled rage, her eyes blazing with the intensity of someone who had been wronged in the worst possible way. She pretended she adored our children. She sat at our table, smiled at our faces, all while screwing my husband behind my back. She wasn't done. Not even close. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, slamming it onto the table with a force that echoed through the room. Here, she spat, her voice dripping with venom. Bank statements. Expensive purchases in Asia. Jewelry he never bought for me, but which Sarah is wearing right now. She pointed at Sarah's ears, where the $10,000 earrings sparkled mockingly under the room's harsh lights, the glittering stones a testament to the betrayal that had unfolded. And here, Lisa continued, her voice cold and steady as she pulled out a receipt, her hand shaking only slightly. Proof. 10 grand. For those earrings. The room went still again, the weight of the evidence suffocating. Sarah's facade crumbled completely. Her hands flew to her ears as if to hide the evidence. But it was too late. The truth was out and there was no taking it back. But I wasn't finished. Not even close. You think that's bad? I asked, my voice low, dangerous, each word a dagger. Let me show you something worse. I pulled out another set of documents. Detailed financial records, emails, and internal memos that painted a picture of deception and greed. Ethan, I said, locking eyes with him, my gaze unflinching. Not only did you betray me personally, but you tried to steal from our company. Gasps echoed around the room, a chorus of disbelief. Ethan opened his mouth to protest, to spin some lie, but I cut him off before he could even begin. Don't even try. I snapped, my voice like a whip. The evidence is ironclad. You've been embezzling funds for over a year. And Sarah? She was in on it. Sarah's eyes widened in horror, the realization crashing down on her like a tidal wave. Greg, that's not true, she cried, her voice cracking, the desperation evident. I didn't know. Save it, I said coldly, my tone leaving no room for argument. If you don't like it, we'll take it to court. That broke her. Completely. Tears streamed down her face as she sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, the weight of her actions finally catching up to her. But I wasn't done. Not yet. You think you've lost everything? I whispered, kneeling beside her, my voice a harsh contrast to her broken sobs. I haven't even shown you the last piece. I stood and faced the room, my eyes sweeping over the stunned faces of our friends and family. Here's the final nail, I announced, holding up one last document. An email chain between Sarah and Ethan, detailing their plans to elope and live off the money they stole from my company. I loved you, I said quietly, my voice heavy with betrayal, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I even bought you your dream house. But now, you'll have nothing. No house, no education at that prestigious university you dreamed of, no support from your family, because they heard the truth today. The room was silent, the weight of the revelations settling like a heavy fog, suffocating and inescapable. And then Lisa stepped forward again, her eyes locked on Ethan with a steely resolve. She slapped a stack of papers onto the table with a finality that echoed through the room. Divorce documents and custody papers for their children. We're done, she said simply, her voice devoid of any emotion. I turned back to Ethan, my voice like ice, each word deliberate and final. You're done too. Consider this your formal termination. You'll be hearing from my lawyers. And just like that, Ethan lost everything, his family, his job, his future. The party was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The echoes of betrayal would linger long after the last guest had left, a haunting reminder of the trust that had been shattered and the lives that had been irrevocably changed.